When the moon calls my father, I stand in the doorway and refuse to move. He tells me to run, and I tell him to remember. This is whispering narratives. We don't just tell stories. We open doors to the shadows. I tie a red ribbon around his wrist, our initials stitched small and stubborn, and I say his name the way a bell says home. Tonight, the beast wants a body. I brought a name. My father is Vale, a builder of modest miracles. He fixes what other people throw out. Motors that cough, steps that groan, fences that forget which side to keep in. He believes in patience over pressure, sharp and slow, nails don't forgive hurry. He laughs rarely and loves honestly, and says very little he doesn't mean. He never believed in monsters. He believed in winter, debt, and the weather's meanness. Then the meanness found him anyway. It began with livestock missing and bark carved 5 fingers too wide, prints in clay like a dog had borrowed boots. The sheriff stopped speaking in euphemism. A search party went into Silver Pike Forest under a sky that didn't want witnesses. 4 men left town. 1 came back, my father. He said rock gave out, and metal bit his leg. He said he was lucky he wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it. I found the truth in the shed, the silhouette splitting wrong in the window, the bench scored by claws that used to be hands. It took me an hour to breathe. It's taken me a lifetime to exhale. We wrote rules because tradition is what fear looks like when it rolls up its sleeves, the cellar on every full, chains padded with leather, our names spoken as anchors. He asked me to take him to the monastery by the river. Men with vows will keep me better than a boy with a bat, he said. I told him no, we do not outsource love. The day before the first moon, I scratched our initials into the cellar frame, E+L, a childish mark that felt like a prayer. He put his palm over it and didn't call it luck. He called it memory. There's a letter in our family Bible, browned and thin as a secret. We are keepers, not killers. When the blood howls, lash the wrists and lash the mind. Each son must be the father's door, and each father must be the son's weight. Not holy writ, logistics. So I made a list because dread, if you write it down, sometimes turns into work. Padded sleeves for the chain. Salt traced where we step in and out, not as magic, as reminder. This is our threshold. A tin of peppermint, because my grandfather kept snuff behind the plow and the nose remembers what the tongue forgets. A red ribbon stitched with our initials to tie to his wrist. He said it felt like a leash. I told him it felt like a lifeline. He smirked the old carpenter's smirk you only see when something fits just right. He offered me his wrist. If you haven't seen a change, you think it's a scream, loud and done. It isn't. It's carpentry. Breath that starts ragged becomes long and greedy and then purposeful, as if it's learned a new alphabet. Ribs yawn wider to house a lung that wants the dark. Hands hold on as long as they can, and then remember wolf and forget everything delicate. He tries to outstubborn the moon. He presses his forehead to the cool floor and says small true things like knots in a rope. Hex head, 3/4. Grease. The bearing. Check the belt. Your birthday is April 3rd. Your mother left in late November. The buck we dressed weighed 82 pounds, and you held the flashlight crooked, and I said it was fine and then made it fine. 210 fence posts on the north field, unless the creek stole one. He says my name the way a drowning man says shore. I say his the way a bell says home. Dad. For a breath, the ears flatten, the chain sighs, and hope pricks up like a dog hearing its leash. Then hunger returns the way taxes do, and the wanting walks the room on borrowed feet. We started a ledger because it's easier to face a flood if you can point to the height marks, triggers, and tethers. Running feet outside, that's a trigger. The hymn my mother hummed while she canned peaches, that's a tether. Blood is a trigger. Peppermint is a tether. Thunder is a trigger. The litany of tools is a tether. My name shouted like fear will pull him across the room. My name spoken like a vow will hold him by an inch. Sometimes the tethers work. Sometimes they don't. That's the part people hate. You can do everything right and still lose 20 seconds that feel like a mile. You do it anyway. You do it again. One night the chain slipped a half-link and I saw, in the space of a heartbeat, a headline and the look the town would wear at my funeral. I snapped the peppermint tin and said memory first, not shouting, just choosing. He froze with breath like a horse that has run through itself and is learning to stand. The hymn in my throat found its key. We wrote chain slip equals sent, plus litany, plus no eye contact, floodplain rules. You don't move uphill and leave the water to ruin everyone else. You pack sandbags, and you stand there. Grief knocked. 2 days after a moon, and took Mrs. Harding with the quiet hands it uses on hearts. The men came with flashlights and old rifles and words that feel like justice when you speak them fast. Sheriff Clem blocked the drive with his car and his body, and told me to talk. I didn't sell miracles, I sold work. Chains and padded sleeves and a room that smelled like peppermint and home and a hymn soft enough to hold and firm enough to matter. Tyler Harding, eyes red, jaw tight, spoke from the back like a boy who wanted to choose mercy and didn't know if he was allowed. Let him prove it, he said. My father stepped forward, wrists bandaged, eyes human. Chain me on your church lawn. If I break, you shoot me. If I don't, you stop pretending you don't have beasts of your own. They took him to St. Bartholomew's because tradition is a mule that carries you where you're too proud to walk. The priest drew a neat ring of salt around the old oak, not for magic, for agreement. The town made a circle of light. I tied the ribbon. I pressed our carved initials into his palm like a promise with edges. "Talk me home," he said, and the tremor in his voice sounded like a bridge in winter. "I've been practicing," I said. The moon rose with the entitlement of a bill. Bones held committee, teeth voted early. I began the litany of little things, the rope we had braided from days that hadn't killed us, the window I broke with a fastball when I was 10, how he let me lie for 6 hours, how he made me sweep for nails barefoot so I would learn where sharp things hide, the well that went dry and his lesson that water is not a right, it is a favor. Look people in the eye, he taught me, not to prove you're good, to see if they are. 210 posts along the north field, unless the creek stole one. The wolf stood up where the man had been, and the red ribbon fluttered like the smallest brave flag. I hammered my words like nails. You taught me my name, they mine. The mouth fought its shape. The throat tried to decide what kind of animal it was. The sound that came hurt to hear and healed something anyway. Son, the town didn't shoot. Not because everything was fine. Because we'd given them inches in a world that deals mostly in yards, and some men know a fair price when they see it. Not shooting a man is not the same as forgiving him. The ledger is written in pencil here, and people erase hard. I scrubbed a slur off our gate at dawn with a wire brush and let the scrape sound like penance and cleaning both. Sheriff Clem warmed his hands on a chipped mug and said, "If you ask me to do nothing, I can't. If you ask me to help you do something, I'm late." We built rituals the way men who can't afford to be wrong build fences. I recorded the sounds our house makes when it remembers us. The truck door that never closes right, the chair scrape that calls dinner, the clink cups make in the sink, my laugh at 7 and 12 and 15. On moon nights the room played us back to him until his pacing learned our rhythm. I boiled peppermint in a dented pot and let the house smell like my grandfather's lie about quitting and the truth of mornings in the field. I tied fresh red ribbon where hands learn, doorknobs, stair rails, the hook where his hat rests like a second spine. Some nights we won whole hours. Some nights we lost only 20 seconds, and the ribbon lay in tatters on the floor and my hands shook until noon. We tied more. We kept count, not to obsess. To prove the ledger can change columns if you keep writing, a kill happened west of the river on a night that wasn't ours. The prints were wrong, longer stride, nails like a violinist instead of a boxer. The county called it a cat to make sleep come when called. Clem and I have met sleep. It lies. We walked at dusk along the creek to a dip where fog sits and stares. Something pale moved with grace that knew the right rules and broke one. Eyes like coins strangers leave when they don't know what else to do. My father looped a chain around his forearm and let it clink once, the sound of honesty in iron. "Talk," Clem said, and meant me. I said the litany, tools and him and the deer and the fence and his name like a drum. The pale thing tracked the sound like weather tracks fences. It pressed its face near my father's and breathed our story. He answered in the only word, the wild respects. No, the chain kissed its muzzle, not cruel, clear. It snarled like a string pulled wrong and lunged. Clem shot into dirt hard enough to teach the ground manners. I shouted Luke, and for a frame, the pale wolf looked like a boy caught stealing and uncertain about sorry. It fled. My father folded into me the way strong men fold when it's finally safe enough to do it. On the walk home, he said it's not just one, it's what we are when no one is looking. Then we'll keep looking, I said, because duty is old-fashioned and still works. We sat on the porch with steam floating from our mugs like confession. "If I hurt you," he began. "You already have," I answered, "because salt is honest and also stings. And you taught me how to survive being hurt." He nodded like a man receiving a verdict he trusts. He set the mug down carefully and gave me the line I needed from the first gouge in the shed. "If I fall, you stop me. If I stand, we help others stand." "Then we stand watch," I said. "It sounds dramatic until you see it's just calendars marked, ribbon bought. A chair by the door for the stranger who will someday arrive with eyes that don't know how to be human yet." The next moon climbed over the trees like it had practiced. The cellar smelled like peppermint and winter. The chain lay coiled, not polished. We let it remember its work. "Talk me home," he said, and his voice didn't crack this time. I remember the way, I told him, and mine did. I tied a new red ribbon and felt the thread bite my fingers and liked that it did. I pressed our carved initials into his palm and watched his hand close over them the way a man accepts a folded flag and refuses to cry where anyone can see. Breath changed shape. Bones took a vote. The hymn waited in my throat like a second. Tongue. Beyond our fields, a howl unspooled the seam of the night, and another answered, and I did not flinch. I stood in the doorway between like I was born to it. Some families inherit money. I inherited a door. People ask whether the son saves the father or becomes the next victim. Both. I save him a minute at a time, and I am the victim of the cost. Fear, work, the knowing that mercy is manual labor. But victim doesn't always end in blood. Sometimes it ends in changed, and changed when you choose it is just another word for alive. Even monsters bow sometimes to the sound of someone who refuses to let go. At Whispering Narratives, we don't just tell stories, we hold the chains steady. If you made it through this one, subscribe before the next full moon and share it with the one soul you drag back from the dark, no matter the cost. Some debts are paid in courage, some are paid in memory. Yours pay both. The woods opened.